My dad's dead, murdered, killed by his brother-in-law. He had a knife behind his back. I could see the knife, but I was a kid.
Your mum's brother killed your dad.
The one and only Riz Iqbal.
Mr. Riz.
Riz Iqbal, welcome to the Harvest.
Still the number one.
The number one. We are still the number one trading podcast in the world.
Renowned trader and podcast host.
From mastering the financial markets to delivering impactful conversations, his journey blends success in both trading and storytelling.
Your dad's brother-in-law
Yeah.
murdered him in the shop that you then went on to own.
Yeah. My mum, she saw his physical body.
She walked in on the scene.
You know, she was the first person to see
Wow.
it. Saw her brother running away. He was having those schizophrenic episodes. This actual case was the reason why I didn't have a man to teach me how to be a man. How could you be a father when you don't know what a father is? I was depressed. So I'd be walking to work and I'd start crying. Crazy PTSD.
Now you've got 229,000 subscribers on YouTube, 500,000 plus followers across all social media platforms. You've got all this. Whereas obviously you didn't start with that.
I was nobody at the time. I had like $8,000 in the account. I literally just blew the whole lot. I had to go get a job. I need to be successful like my dad, not only like my dad, but do the exact same shop.
You lost £100,000.
Yeah. One of the big reasons I think my channel has consistently performed very well is simply because
I'm Ben Edwards, and you're listening to The Heart of It. A few years ago, life humbled me and made me take a long, hard look at my choices. One day, you're going to hear a lot of things about me. Some of those things I can't talk about right now, but I had to make a lot of changes. I lived a life fueled by shame, and shame cannot survive being spoken about. It needs these three things to survive: secrecy, silence, and judgment. So I made the decision to start talking about these things, and I'd like to invite you to listen to how that played out. This is the therapy that I never thought that I needed. Let's get to the heart of it. Riz Iqbal, welcome to the heart of it.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Not your first time on a podcast.
No, definitely not. Yeah, definitely not. First, I don't get onto other people's podcasts often, to be fair.
You don't?
So, yeah, one of the few.
Because you're the only trading podcast, or certainly the biggest.
I'm the biggest, yeah, but not the only.
Okay.
There were some before me, mainly like Zoomcasts. Though I wouldn't class them as a podcast,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
But then there have been ones after me, as you can imagine.
Yeah. So 229,000 subscribers on YouTube as of this morning, 500,000 plus followers across all social media platforms. That's quite some statistics going in mind. But channel's 2 and a bit years old?
Yeah, just over 2. I had 2 and 2 months, 2 and 4 months of that.
So how did that all start?
It's a funny old story. So I came across trading in 2016, but at the exact same time, I came across podcasting, and of course, you come across the OG, Mr. Joe Rogan, and I remember just listening to it, and it was actually the specific episode I can remember. It must have been, I don't know the specific number, but it was like episode, I don't know, 200 or 300, so very early on, because I think he's on like 2000 now. But it was Russell Brand, which, funny enough, I was never a big fan of him growing up, because he used to be a whole different character when I was growing up. He was like this very rock and roll type, and it just didn't resonate with me growing up. But when, at this point, he had become someone different. And he was very much speaking about like perception and mindset. And I just remember, it was like I was learning a lot, and I was just like really taking in what he was saying. But then equally at the same time, I was like, this podcasting stuff, because back then it was very new still. Joe Rogan was like one of the, I wouldn't say the very few, but like at least one of the very few who was known to do it. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, I would love to do something like this. Like, I could do something like this. And at the time, I owned a corner shop, which didn't, in terms of a business, didn't go very well, but there was a story behind that. So I was trying to learn how to trade. So I was passionate about trading, just found it, but then also found podcasting. At the time, I wanted to start. And I even like had a notebook, which I used to have in the shop, where I'd put my goals and stuff. And one was start a podcast, started researching how to start a podcast equipment, had a name for the podcast. The name was Hope Dealer Podcast, which didn't end up happening, as you can imagine. But Hope Dealer Podcast, I wrote out names of people I knew who I could try and get on, from people who had done successful things from school to people I knew, friends of friends and family friends, and just influencers I could get in reach from Nottingham, for example, or East Midlands. I planned it all out, but I did the classic thing of sort of pushing myself out of it and convincing myself I needed to have a studio. I had to build a studio, spend tens of thousands, and And then I could start a podcast, and only then. When in reality, if you look at Joe Rogan, for example, episode 1, it's on Zoom, essentially. It's on their laptop. Or on a PC. I don't know how old that one was, but like if you look at his original episodes, the quality there was no focus on quality. There was no focus on like having a setup, and that's really how, one of the valuable lessons in terms of success is literally starting. Just start, like have an idea and then begin. And I think a lot of people just always think there's a perfect time or a perfect setup or a perfect, circumstance to begin. When in reality, as long as you start and stay consistent, the rest will sort itself out. So that was the beginning phase of the podcast, or the idea anyway, was planted then. And then, I didn't do anything with it. I was focused on trading. And then I want to say like 6 years later, I then went on someone's podcast within the trading space. They had a channel where they did multiple things. So it wasn't like dedicated podcast, but they were one of the few who started doing some podcasts. And I went on his, and I've learned in London, you could hire studios. So then once I learned that, there was no excuses anymore. Like I knew, okay, I don't need a setup. I can just hire the studio and then start. So as soon as I did that, I just started doing it straight away. Started just doing it with people I knew, people from my community at the time in trading, and then just stayed consistent with it. And I just loved it. And I think because there was so much passion behind it, it was just easy to do. Yeah, there were struggles in terms of like the consistency or getting episodes up and so on and so forth. But because I had such a passion for it, it didn't feel like work. So I just constantly was doing it over and over and over. And through doing so, I think I learned skill sets. Like when I first started, I wasn't that good. Like I was good in terms of conversation, but I wasn't good in terms of listening and not speaking as much. I used to just think it was a conversation where you just go back and forth. But from the feedback, I was learning quickly that people just wanted to hear from the guest. So I picked that up quickly. But yeah, eventually it just snowballed. It was like a momentum thing.
Interesting couple of points there. Consistency. 21 episodes. Podcast never even reached most of them. Once you're past 22, I think it is, if you're becoming like the top 1% of podcasters. It was the stat at one point.
Yeah.
When did you notice putting out enough episodes to really get either momentum or actually realize what was going on?
I think it was interesting because I recorded so many episodes, and during that time, it was literally just 1K viewers, like 1K views each time, and the small amount of subscribers growing. It took us from May of 2022 to December of 2022, or basically the end of 2022, 2,500 subscribers when I started, because I had a channel and it wasn't just a podcast. It was like your usual sort of trading videos, such as like top 3 tips for this, or a case study of some charts, or market breakdowns. Very generic, what you will see if you go into the trading space sort of content, and it just didn't resonate with me. I was doing it and I could do it. It was quite easy for me to do, but it wasn't like passionate about it. It was just like, okay, this is what everyone does when you make content in this space. Let's make this. Then when I started the podcast, so at that time I had 2.5K subs. To the end of the year, I got to 5K subs, which is already in itself was quite good. But then in 2023, I went from 5K subs to 133 by the end of the year. So the momentum happened in that year. But between that period of the start of the podcast to the end of that year, I'd recorded, I don't know how many episodes. It was something like maybe 15 or 20 episodes. And a lot of them were people I knew, like I said. So they weren't like influencers or like large people online. They were just people I knew. And it just slowly, I think as I was doing it, I was tapping into a friend of a friend who then had a bit more of an influence or a bit more of a following, and had a bit more people who wanted to tune in to listen to that person's story. And it just kind of, I think the consistency, the attention to quality, and then my skill set of conversation as well, then allowed it to reach slightly bigger people. So then I was starting to get people on who I had followed for years in the trading space, who looked up to in the trading space. I remember Mark Hutchison was like one of the first people who had quite a decent following, and someone who I'd looked up to and still look up to. Like he's very, very in tune with his psychology, and just a fantastic speaker and a holder of knowledge. And he was one of the first big guests. And I remember like how nervous I felt going into that podcast. It doesn't happen anymore, thankfully. But I just remember I was literally like sweating, right? Whilst I'm asking him questions. And yeah, I remember that podcast very well. And that was one of my first like bigger guests. And then from there, it was like the next bigger guest. And then there was one particular guest who helped us sort of like tip over the edge. And my editor always said to me, like, just all you have to do with podcasting is just keep going. And then there'll be one guest, and you don't know who it will be. It could be a nobody. It could be someone massive. Just one guest who will tip you over the edge, will give you that fuel that will take you. And then from there, it's your job just to continue it, which we've done a good job of, thankfully. But that guest was Raja Banks, which within our space, he's a very well-known personality, but he's got a very strong personality and just made for podcasting. Like he was being very polarizing. He was being very confident in his speech. And we were able just to clip that and make the trailers in a certain way. And then thanks to my team as well, of course. But thanks to that, it just took us from 5K to 10K subs. And then there was an episode that was in response to him, which was a nobody in terms of their social presence. They had no social media in terms of like followers. They had like 1K on Twitter, didn't even have their face on there. But that person, again, spoke with such confidence and conviction and was in response to Raja, a bit polarizing in their views. And then that one blew up. That's our most viewed episode. That guy who was essentially a no one. And his episode sits on like 760,000 views.
Wow.
And
what do you think the difference is from the known profiles to the nobodies? Is there a secret sauce of what makes a good podcast episode?
it's just the way they speak. It's literally the conviction of how strong and confident they are. So like, for example, I can have someone who is essentially a no one in terms of social media. Everyone has a story, but they come and they're very nervous. Like the lights kind of, they've never done it before, which is, it's understandable. But the lights kind of put them off, the cameras, they're overthinking, and therefore they're very nervous, and you can feel the energy, and it comes across as well sometimes onto the camera. And therefore, if you think about it from the audience's point of view, they're like, why should I listen to this person? Right? They don't seem very confident in what they're saying. Versus if someone's a nobody, but they speak with such conviction and such confidence, right? And they speak in terms of like what they're saying is the gospel, like that is the thing that is right, versus and maybe they're saying something else that's completely wrong. It's just that polarizing, that it just draws people to listen to that person because they're speaking with that confidence and they're speaking with authority. And that's what I've noticed, literally. I think in terms of trading podcast wise, maybe even podcast in general, but we've had, one of our niches is taking people who don't have a following. Like I'm very open to taking people who have no following whatsoever, because I know that me and my team can make it work. Like we've had plenty of episodes that have done 100,000 views where they had no social following, and it's been no problem at all. Like a lot of people within my space who are competitors, if you will, they would never really have anyone on who don't have a following because they probably believe they can't do anything with it. When in reality, it's like, that's your job. That's your job as the host and as the podcast, brand, if you will, to be able to make that happen, versus it's not someone else's job to bring you views, in my opinion.
One of the things I was talking to someone about yesterday is when you find an author that's got an audio book on Audible or a book that you want to listen to, you hear someone talking about it. If they've been on a podcast with somebody who I know and follow, so for example, Brené Brown, Simon Sinek, Lewis Howes, I'd like to go and listen to them on their podcast, like someone's introducing me, like a friend is introducing me to this person, their concepts and their ideas and their beliefs. And I think that kind of crosses over what you're saying there. If someone's got strong views, or a view at least, that they're prepared to share, then when someone your audience know you as the host, so you're introducing this person's concepts, whether you agree with their beliefs or their concepts or not, it's almost like you're acting as a friend at a party saying, this person's got some ideas that you might want to listen to, whether you agree with them or not. Because I really like listening to the new people if someone's introducing me to them. I don't really like going and listening to new people cold.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, that does make sense. It's interesting with podcasting because I think a lot of people, sometimes the audience, I think, gets confused with what podcast is about. Like a podcast isn't there. It depends on the podcast, but let's say my podcast, for example, I'm not there to say like every person who comes on my podcast is 100% correct and you need to listen to every single word they say and you need to follow what they do. Because as you say, like there's so many different nuances, so many different styles. It doesn't matter what industry you're in as well. Like even like Diary of a CEO, like he has people who are covering the same subject but are completely polar opposite sides of it. And I don't think his task is saying to you like, listen to this person and he's right. It's more so like this person has a particular view, just listen to it, see what they're saying. And then let's go on the opposite side and listen to that person and see what they're saying. And it's the same within my industry. Like a lot of the times the audience might be like, why have you had this person on? Or what this person's saying is completely wrong because he said I'm completely wrong. When in reality, it's like, that's that person's perception. That's that, you don't know what that person's intention is either. Maybe that person's intention is for you to get riled up and then comment and then, have their episode sort of expand. Or maybe it's just that is their point of view. Like he's a more professional trader, used to work at Goldman Sachs, Dr. Chris Caffey, for example, and he doesn't believe scalping type of trading, which is like very short-term trading, he doesn't believe that works at all. When in reality, there are other professionals who may have worked at the same exact bank who probably do scalp, for example. But that's just his perception. That's just his belief. And his version of scalping might be very different to everyone else's view. So when people hear that, they get very like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. When in reality, he knows what he's talking about. He has the accolades, he has the experience to be able to say such a thing, but it's just his perception. And if you look at a lot of professionals, they have strong views. Like very successful people will always have strong views because they've amounted their success in a certain way. So that way works for them. So that's what they're going to always say is the successful way to do it. It's like me. Like I have very polarizing views when it comes to podcasting and social media and success as a whole. I'll always put it down to that consistency and putting that work in. And then people always say to me, but I've got this, my lifestyle doesn't allow me time to do that. And I'm like, yeah, not really. Like you'll always have time. And really, it's like I said at the very beginning, there's no perfect time. Like if you're always going to say something like that, you're never going to do it because there's always going to be something that gets in the way. And I'm sure people will be out there like, that's not the right way. Like you do need to plan and strategize and find that perfect thing before you start. And it's like, that's fine. It's all dependent on a person's point of view. And I think with podcasts, a lot of people assume that your goal is every single person you're getting on, you're co-signing as this is the correct way. When in reality, you're just giving the person a platform to provide their point of view and from their experience. And the audience and yourself are just listening and just questioning and picking away from it. And there'll be it's like a book. Like not every page in a book is you're going to take away from and be like, wow, every single word in this book really changed my life. It's normally just one line or one chapter or one paragraph that resonates with you and you take away. And that's what I found anyway. Like every book I've ever read, I haven't read too many. I have a bunch of books, as you can imagine, but I've not read too many. But every single one, there's always like one nugget that sits with me, not the whole thing. And the same principle with podcasts. It's like you're just taking away one thing from each guest. And that, as a host, I've recently sort of created an analogy for it, which is as a podcast host, you're essentially just collecting Yu-Gi-Oh cards, right, or Pokemon cards. That's all it is. Like you're just. Sometimes you get these super rare guests, like super high level. Sometimes you get these super low level guests, right? And your job is just to collect them all, right? Just try and have the best deck, if you will, the best collection of guests as possible, and that's it. That's all I think podcasting really is like obviously you want quality control, but that's your job, is just to collect as many guests as possible, different areas of life, different experience levels, and then do your job to create a quality episode out of it.
Is it easy for you to say, now you've got 200,000 plus subscribers, that it's easy for you to get those kind of guests, have those kind of guests come on? Because people have said that, right? But it's all right for you. You've got all this. Whereas obviously you didn't start with that.
That's it. And I think it's easier. It's easy to say in terms of guests. Like guests, I don't even focus on guests. Like me personally, like I said, I still have people on who have no social following, who essentially people wouldn't look at. Especially in my position in terms of, like I said, 200,000 plus subscribers, people probably wouldn't look at. I never even think about it, to be honest with you. But no, because just as I started with nobody, essentially nobody's. Like that's how you start, and then it's easy to start that way. Everything's perception based. Like it's as easy as you make it. Like if you think it's going to be hard, it's going to be hard, right? It's like if you think. And I'm not going to sit there and say everything's in your mind, but at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to your perception of how you look at it. If you're looking at it as it's going to be difficult to get that person on, or it doesn't matter. Like even now at this point, there's still people who say no, or there's still people who don't reply to a message, and there's still people who, are maybe outside of my reach, for example, for now. But I just know, like at a certain point, I just believe in myself, and I'll push myself, and I'll make it possible for that door to open when the time's right. And like I said, when I started, I didn't have any access to anybody. I was nobody at the time. And that's just how it works. And that's how everyone starts. Like everyone can look at it, and you can look at every successful person. You can look at Denzel Washington and be like, this guy was always a phenomenal actor. I'm sure in his early days, he had his hiccups. He had his problems that he had to work through and adversities. And I'm sure he was rejected a bazillion times before he became Denzel Washington, right? And you could take that same example to anywhere, sports, acting, anything successful wise. Everyone always looks at that person and goes, it's easy for them to say now. But they probably were saying the same thing early on as well, but just no one was listening at that time. So the beauty with podcasting and social media, though, is you can go back. You can go back to episode 1 of the podcast. You can go back to episode 5 and then see what the mindset was like. Was I still sharing that same thoughts,
Do you think it's harder, though, now because it's such a more crowded industry? Because as you mentioned, Joe Rogan, laptop, webcast. If you start a new podcast now, your content's going to have to be so good. But as I just said that, Alex Hormozy came out in a cupboard and hit it. Was putting out about top level content that had no production value of it at all. So Alex Hormozy being one side of that spectrum of no production value at the beginning in a cupboard to high level studios. What do you think that is now with the industry being so saturated?
It's both sides. There's positive and negative. So the positive, though, if you think about it, is now the blueprint's there. Joe Rogan had no blueprint. He had to create it. He had to just go and trial and error and do what he did. Versus now, there's people there's everyone. There's all the successful people. You just look at them and go, okay, how do I to start? A starting reference is already there now. This is how I need to start, or this is where I can look to start. And even if you don't have the money, let's say, to get to that level straight away, it's just more so okay, I have a benchmark of where I can get to. But in terms of content, really, the reality of content is effort, just really the consistency. It doesn't matter the production level. It doesn't matter, how much money you need to spend. In the beginning, you don't have to spend anything, especially nowadays. This is the thing, right? Now there's so much access to different software, different even hardware that's so accessible and cheaper to use that you don't necessarily need any money to get started with content. But most people will still put themselves off by having that excuse. But yeah, it's so much easier to begin. And it's so easy, don't get me wrong, to talk yourself into thinking oh my God, I need to have the highest level of production, or look at all these different people. They're doing different camera angles. They're doing all these different types of captions or these VFX, etc. And it's daunting. It can be. But the reality is you have to start somewhere, and no one starts that way unless they are already successful in some other industry.
I think
they had all this money, right?
I think that's the point.
To be able to invest in it.
Exactly that, I think. I'm a definite perfectionist. That's kind of got in my way, as you mentioned. But I didn't want to start it in a certain way. But I had already had something before. So I didn't just start, my first ever entrepreneurial journey is this, hoping to make money from a YouTube channel 3 years down the line. You mentioned, though, it's taken 6 years from your first idea of owning a podcast to actually starting the podcast. You mentioned the team that you've got now. Did you start with a team? You said you started with little money.
I started with one team member. So basically at the time I had a trading community, and I had hired a videographer and sort of editor for that trading community. And we met during COVID. He was a freelancer at the time, and I was just essentially a trader, but with very little following at the time. And I remember actually, it was here in Nottingham. We had met in, where is it? That Audi at the top of Ed Walton?
Yeah.
It was COVID time, so he had to get in my car. We parked up in the car park. He got in the back, and I didn't even turn around to speak to him. I looked in the mirror, and it was like a mafia thing. I was questioning it. But he was a freelancer at the time, and yeah, we essentially, that's how we met. And he was working with us on that community. We would do community meetups, all those other videos I mentioned earlier. He would edit those, and he's always very skillful. But thankfully, he was working with some high-level people during that time as well, social media influence, the Misfits, for example, or a lot of the social media boxing. Or right now, they work with The Zone, for example, and they're currently at this point doing the AJ Dubois fight, for example. They work with some very high-level people at this point. By that time, he was a freelancer, as I said. So when we started the pod, was he still a freelancer? I think he was just a freelancer just when I started the pod. But shortly after that, they created their agency. There's 2 sets of brothers. It's called Blood Brother Media. And they were 2 sets of brothers who were very close friends, created this company. And though it's still just the editor, really, who works with me directly, but we have other projects now and other YouTube channels that we've started that incorporates the Blood Brother Media aspect. But the one in particular, his name's Josh. I had him on the podcast early on, to be fair. But he's the head... He's essentially the podcast manager, if you will, the guy who me and him just go back and forth and do all the ideas, etc. And we've taken on some more people in terms of short form, taken on people in terms of graphics. So the actual podcast team is small. But then when we go into the various other projects, that's when the team expands, because we then take on the agency side who are then involved in that. But the way we started was just me and him. Like, we've never missed an upload. And no matter how busy he's been or I've been or whatever's happened, we've never missed an upload. We've never been late, even if it went up like an hour before.
And when you say missed an upload, do you mean in the terms of weekly or bi-weekly schedule?
Weekly, yeah. So we do weekly at some point, ever so often. Like next month, we're doing 2 a week. But yeah, we've never missed one. We've never missed an upload, and that's a big part on the editor's side. Because for me, for example, I just sit down, I record, I talk, and then I hand it all off to him.
Just sit down and
That's
talk.
it, yeah. But that's how I feel sometimes, because when I look at what he does, and then what the other guys do as well, that is such a strenuous task. Like editing a lot of people might think it's easy to edit a podcast, which you could like run it through a program. That's easy, but it's just not the same feel, because the program just doesn't understand the human emotion. It doesn't understand the pauses. If you say something and I laugh, for example, it doesn't mean the camera needs to cut to me laughing, but the program will do that. It will just pick up the sound and switch it, and that's just robotic, and you can feel it really. When in reality, like that human touch will make a big difference. And then, especially when it comes to trailers and like the promotion, the marketing of that episode, that all comes down to the way that's edited, really, and the way the graphics are. It's not really too much on me. Like, it's me to post it, me to talk about it. But really, like, those things are the nuances.
Yeah, to get people to the long form is like the long piece of the actual content, but actually the short forms is the actual way to get people to.
Exactly.
And it's like, I think you mentioned last time we spoke about this, that it's the hooks and those reels that you really blasted in that first year that got you that momentum.
Yeah.
And that took you off.
Yeah, well, it's like the short form is the steroids, if you will. It's like the thing that really will prop up and build a foundation for the rest. So like before that Raja Banks episode, I didn't do too much short form. I had just a trailer and that was it, and little pieces. And normally they were quite delayed just because we didn't have like a well-oiled machine at that time. We didn't need one at that time, if you will. But by around that sort of time, that's when we start really like pumping short form content, like multiple pieces. So I get about 9 to 12 pieces of content per YouTube video. There's a lot more, but they're like, we just try and get the best pieces, and really that's as many as I can post between episodes. So like between, let's say, a week, that's how many, like 2 a day normally between. So if I try and take any more, it just becomes too much. Like, and you can, like, don't get me wrong, you can create like clips channels. There's so many different methods now that can really help. I haven't seen too many clips channels on podcasts, to be fair. But yeah, there's so many different methods. But the short form was really something that helped us to really accelerate the growth, because it just resonates with people more. Like, a lot of more people are going to watch the short form, and then some will then obviously translate to the long form. But either way, it's just bringing your awareness and reach of your brand and your podcast or whatever your personal brand. It's just expanding it more eyes on you, more people's recognizing, hey, that particular guy, that host or that guest, I've seen them a few times now. Like, who is this person? And it's just that intrigue starts to build, versus if you just have one clip, the chances of loads of more people seeing that one clip. So like, I've had reels that have done 1 million views, right, short form, and has equated to, like, we had on our new channel last week we had one reel that was on there, and it just started taking off, right? Just a YouTube short, sorry, not a reel. It started just taking off. It went from 5K views to like 330,000 views in the space of a week. It equated to 7,000 subscribers in that week from one short form piece of content. And that is the power of the short form, right? Because then the style, the one thing that you have to be careful of when it comes to short form, and it's not even like you can control it, but just something to be aware of, is that depending on your podcast, so mine's all trading related, so it's not too bad on my side, because all the guests are talking about trading. So if a short form piece of content goes viral and people are subscribing to my channel because of that piece of content which is talking about trading, they're going to see more of trading. While if, let's say, for example, someone like yourself or another podcast where there's various types of guests, let's say something I talk about, let's say trading wise, goes viral here, but then your next 10 guests aren't traders. You've got all this audience that have subscribed to you then who aren't resonating with trading. Does that make sense? Or they're trying to resonate with trading, but they're not resonating with the rest of the guests. So that's the only thing, and you can't control it, but it's just something to be aware of, and something to kind of make sure The only reason I say aware of is because let's say you then put out the next piece of content and you're thinking, yeah, this guy, we just hit 7K off the last one. We should get it again. That might be why, because then it's like, okay, they resonate with that particular topic, but then the next person's topic is completely wildly different. So they're not going to resonate with that. But luckily with me, because I decided to niche down, I think that's helped me. I've seen some other people in my space where they've tried to come in and they're a bit more wide range, or they're trying to be wide range, but they've kind of cornered themselves with the traders. And then when they bring on other people who are, you know, legit business people and legit successful people, they're not getting the views simply because they kind of cornered the audience with trading. So when they get these other people on, no matter how successful they are, these people aren't resonating as much because they want the trading, you know?
Would you classify yourself as a podcaster or a trader, or a podcaster that trades, or a trader that podcasts?
As most of you know, my diet is pretty strict most of the time, so it makes it even more important to me that when I have a cheat meal, it delivers. There is nothing worse than ordering a takeaway and it being wrong, missing items, or just not being what you expected or you hoped for. That's why having the support of Kasim from Bombay Joe's Bingham has been a game changer. Kasim has been a supporter of the podcast from the very beginning, providing all the food for the launch party. And we recently went to see Kasim and the team at Bombay Joe's Bingham, a takeaway restaurant that's a modern-inspired take on Indian street food. Opening 6 days a week, 5 p.m. till late, based in Bingham, Nottingham, and can deliver to a wide radius, including West Bridgeford, serving all of your favourite curries and classic Indian dishes. Kasim has got you covered. And Kasim has put together an exclusive offer just for To The Heart of It listeners. To claim your exclusive offer from Kasim, just visit theheartofitpodcast.com/sponsors, where you can download the Bombay Joe's Bingham app and get your exclusive offer code. And as a thank you to Kasim, our team has put together a special social media pack, which you can check out on their social media on Instagram at Bombay Joe's Bingham, where you can find their latest menus and give them a follow.
Would you classify yourself as a podcaster or a trader, or a podcaster that trades, or a trader that podcasts?
I still love trading. Like, I want to do it, but the amount of time that I put into all these different projects and channels now, I don't get time. So it's a very interesting thing in my space, because a lot of people, when they do this, like social media wise, they need to portray that they're trading all the time. And I've thankfully been always just very open and honest. Like, I love trading. I was successful at trading, but not hyper successful. I wasn't making millions from trading. I think if I had continued to trade, like without putting time into the podcast, I probably would have gotten there, because I've got that mindset of being successful at something and mastering something. But I put it to one side because I just loved podcasting. It was just something about podcasting. I just loved it. I still love it. Like for me to do, I think last year I probably recorded near enough, I don't even know, like 60, 70 episodes, maybe more, like maybe nearly 100 episodes. As I mentioned to you before we started, like I deleted recently 30, which was like half of our backlog. So imagine I had 60 episodes, so over a year's worth of content, deleted 30 of it. And now I'm trying to bring that down, because I think having such a backlog isn't necessary. But yeah, I would say I'm a podcaster, right? Who trades, or is still interested in trading, who wants to still trade, but just have not had the time. And I'm trying to figure out that sort of formula at the moment of how do I do the trading and the podcasting. But I'm not in like a rush to trade, because there's so much, like trading requires so much attention. Like if you want to do it successfully, you have to pay attention, and you need to have a very strong routine and strict routine around your trading. And I just can't give that simply because I travel so much for the podcast, and I'm recording so often, not only with the podcast but our new channel as well, that I'm okay, and I accept the fact that I'm not trading, because what am I known for the podcast? So what does it matter if I trade or not, in my opinion? But there are other podcasters in my space where they might still be trading. So I don't know. I'm not going to sit there and be like, they're not trading and they're trying to make out they are. But their identity still is attached to that trading side. So I think it's harder for them, because they will get the same comments I do sometimes. We're like, you're just a podcaster. Me personally, I'm like, yeah, that's great. You know what I mean? Like, I don't mind. And as long as you attach successful podcaster on there, that's fine. But other people might not take that as well as I do. They might be like, oh no, I still trade. And I did that on purpose, but I didn't want to go into that battle. I didn't want to be that person who's like, no, I need to convince you I'm a trader as well, and I need to convince you that this is who I am too. No, I'm a podcaster, that's fine. But I'm good at it, I'm amazing at it, and I've done well at it so far, you know?
You mentioned the corner shop earlier on. Did you always see entrepreneurship in your future?
Yeah, so it was really weird. I was talking about this recently with my friends and my wife and my mom as well. entrepreneurship was always there. Like, it was literally the only thing that I saw for myself. I didn't go to college. I went to the first year of sixth form, actually around the corner from here. But I went first year in sixth form, but I knew I didn't want to go. I was just going because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. And I was going more so, not because of my mum. The weird thing is, like, people would assume, oh, it's your parents pushing you. I just went because I didn't have anything else to do. And yes, my mum did want me to sort of go down the education route, which at the time I always just assumed, like, why? But now, being a bit older, we can talk on it as well. I understand why the university route is beneficial or has some form of benefit. Mainly because if you don't know what you're going to do and you want to be an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship's so hard. Like, it's easy to think, like, if you just work hard at something and you find some sort of idea, you'll be successful and you'll make money. But the reality is, because that's the misconception, I think, with entrepreneurship. When you look at it from the outside, you think, once you're a business owner or once you're an entrepreneur and you work for yourself, that's it. That's the first instance. But then when you do it the first time, you recognize, like, no, that's not the case. Like, it's completely the opposite. You actually end up working way harder than you do in a 9-to-5 with way more risk as well, that no one really talks about until you do it, right? But now people talk about it online, social media. Back then, to be fair, when I was doing it, social media wasn't as vast as it is now. But regardless, like, if you haven't experienced it, you don't really resonate with when people are telling you the truth, because you just assume they're lying, or you assume that, that's just them, or they're just saying it. But you're stronger than that. When in reality, it's like, it's just the truth. Like, they're just telling you the truth, and you should take it on board. But as they say, experience is king. But yeah, sixth form, I left after 1 year. I started just going getting like jobs and stuff. I tried all sorts, to be fair. Like, I sold like sweets in school. You can imagine it's not really too entrepreneurship, but I tried to make some money there. And I'll just spend the same money on more sweets probably that I would then consume. So it was never really a thing. But
you mentioned a quote the last time we spoke, something about selling the reality or selling a dream and then getting a reality.
Yeah, so like with the podcast and with like short form content and with all this sort of stuff, it's the reality is like, you sell them what they want to hear, but then you give them what they need. So like, you know, like with podcast, with trading, for example, I could sit there and make a reel. I want it to go viral because what are the purpose of you making a piece of content for? You want the reach. So you say something like, trading is easy, right? Very polarizing. It's not easy. That's what they want to hear, though. They want to hear that it's easy. But then you know, once they're through the door, everything else should be about what they actually need, right? So that's where the podcast comes in. So I might make a short piece of content. I don't really get to make short form myself, like me recording short form. I saw from the pod nowadays. But early on, I would shoot short form. And one of them was that line. That was the hook. Forex trading is easy. That hook alone is already polarizing. People are like, wow, people start arguing, and that just makes the content go viral. And that video originally on Instagram did like 3 million views or something, and so many people are going to follow you because of that. But then what are they getting after that? Right? Is it just the same thing over and over again? Like, it's easy, and you're just portraying this message that really isn't true. When in reality, I'd say it was easy, but I didn't say like everything else was easy. I said once you have the skill set, meaning once you've knocked it down, it's easier, right? But a lot of people will ignore that little nuance, which is fine because that's the purpose of that piece of content anyway. But then after that, what is it that you're feeding them? Are you feeding them the reality, like the truth and what they actually need to hear? Because I think that's the responsibility of creators. Do what you need to do to build the audience, cool, in an ethical way for sure. But then make sure once you've got them, you're then giving them good. And I think it's important as well to recognize that once you have the bigger your audience gets, the more responsibility you have. So that's why I deleted a bunch of episodes, because one was time-wise, as I said to you, like I'd recorded some that was so long ago. I just felt like I needed to either re-record them. I just can't put them out now because it's been so long. But equally, a large portion of them was quality control. Like, maybe it was the quality control, just cameras or mics or lighting, or a large portion of it was the guest. Like, was this guest up to scratch in terms of who I want to put on the platform? Because in my space, and just generally, there's a lot of people out there who, they're marketing, right? They're marketing, and it's not like maybe a negative thing. I don't want to say they're bad people, but that's just their thing. Like, they will use a certain lifestyle, or they'll use content to just market a product. There's not much substance and value there. And that's where podcasting is very important, to try and just weed that out. Sometimes you will have someone on, but you've questioned them properly, where they've exposed themselves in terms of that substance and value, and that's fine to still put out because you did your job as a host. Sometimes you might sit down with someone and you know, because you don't want to be rude and you don't want to attack people either. And again, it's like, what they're doing isn't necessarily wrong or unethical. It's just like it doesn't sit right with you, and you don't feel like it would probably sit right with your audience, or you don't feel comfortable platforming this person because all they're trying to do is sell a product, right? So then, yeah, that was quality control, delete those episodes. But just quickly going back to the entrepreneurship thing, I was always on it. Yeah, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had a misconception of entrepreneurship. Did that shop. I mainly did the shop because my dad owned that same exact shop. My dad was an entrepreneur. To be fair, he was an academic, to be fair, who I think went into entrepreneurship when he came to this country. He had a master's in mathematics, was probably going to do a PhD. But I think he was doing the shop. One sense entrepreneurship also allowed him to do that whilst my mum started her law degree. He unfortunately passed away in that very shop. And then I think I just always had this thing, like I need to be successful like my dad, not only like my dad, but do the exact same shop. So I was kind of tied to this shop. And so I did it. Yeah, I did it. And it just wasn't, that's when I learned all those lessons. Like I said, like, you know, when you're an entrepreneur, you work all the hours, like, and you have to put more time in, and you're taking all the risk. And it didn't work out well, to be fair. Like, bear in mind, there's a shop here. When he had it, there wasn't like the big superstore called, you know, Walmart or Asda. There wasn't the Sainsbury's Presto. There was less shops in the area, so it made sense. But at this point, when I've got it, it's already had like such a bad reputation from previous owners, between my dad having it and then me having it. It was really run down, and there was all these other shops in the area. So now there wasn't really as much of a demand for this shop. But I didn't take all this into account. I overpaid for the shop. The person who was renting the shop to us was trying to overcharge on the rent, for example. But I didn't know any of this stuff, right? My mum tried to advise me because she knew it, but she kind of was allowing me to fail, essentially. Allowing me to do what I wanted to do so I could learn the lesson myself, which I'm always appreciative for, because if she had, let's say, stopped me from doing it, I probably would have built resentment for her, but equally not learned the lesson, right? So big failure there, about 100,000 plus gone on that venture.
Because you lost £100,000?
Yeah, on the shop. So like the lease was 50, and then stock was about another 50 to 70 throughout the year I had it. And so that was a valuable lesson there. Like if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have really understood entrepreneurship and risk and even like conventional business, like owning a physical location, staff and stock. That's not the sort of business that I want to run.
As in the overheads you have before you even make any sales.
In comparison to social media, right? Social media, like, is such a lean business. Like, you can really design social media, no matter which part of the industry you're in. Social media is such a lean business. Like, it's like 80% profit margins, 90%, even 50% profit margins, depending how you do it. Like with me, for example, you know, we could be talking 40, 50%. I invest pretty much everything back into the platforms. Because I'm in that sort of growth stage, and that's one of the reasons why we grow so much, I think, as well. But if I didn't want to do that, then I could definitely probably have 60, 70% profit margins, which you're not going to find in a conventional business, like a restaurant or like a corner shop or, you know, a gym or whatever. Like, you're not going to see those profit margins, and the risk is way higher because you're taking on all of these different locations and staff and so on, versus a social media business, which is very much digital and can be monetized in so many different ways. That's why I'm always guilty of being very polarizing with my opinion of saying like everyone should get in social media. And I truly believe it, but I understand that not everyone's going to do it, of course, and not everyone should do it as well, of course. But like in reality, I think a lot of people, especially in our generation, they want to be on social media. They just stop themselves. They don't be consistent with it. They stop themselves from other people's opinions a lot of the time. So they stop themselves because they think they need the perfect timing, as we've said. And I think it's the nature of the world. Like, we're just going more digital. And if we look at, like, I was thinking about it on the way here, actually. There's an episode of Black Mirror where essentially the episode concept is it's the social credit score system of China, where, you know, you're based on your followers or how many, your metrics, essentially. And if you are friends with someone who has lower metrics, then your metric goes down. And if you don't have a certain amount of metrics, you can't fly on a plane. You have to take a bus, wherever it may be. And that's kind of where we're slowly going by the looks of it. Hopefully not, because that's quite a dangerous place. But having social media there's a lot of leverage behind it. I've never used the leverage, to be fair, in terms of I use it in terms of my industry and for my role as a podcast host to try and leverage guests and so on and so forth. But I know people who use it who have less followers than me, for example, who use it to get hotel stays, to use it to do trips, to use it to, collaborate with certain brands and stuff. And I've not done that yet, but I don't know why I haven't done that, to be fair. I should. But it's a wise thing. It's like a beneficial thing to be able to use, And I think because a lot of people want to do it, they should do it, and they should just learn how to do it. And I don't think it's that hard to learn nowadays. I think there's so much information out there. There's so much information out there where you can learn A to Z, and then after that, it's just doing it. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like, most people know how to do it. They can look at other people's content and probably replicate it, but they just don't do it. Like,
do you think the emotional factor of the corner shop was the reason you paid 5 times what it was worth?
100%, yeah, 100%. It was this misguided. It wasn't even misguided. It was this subconscious need of validation from myself, from maybe my mom, or from like other people. Like, I really resonated. My whole identity, and it's really weird because this last 2 weeks I've been thinking about it, and I haven't thought about it for a long time. But like, my identity growing up, I assigned a lot of it to my dad passing, like my dad being taken from me. Every time I'd go to either a new school or just be in school or like whatever it was, I'd always, or even like a new job, because it happened for a long time. It was even up until maybe I was like 18, 19, 20-ish. But from 5 years old when he passed to then, I would always want to be able to find a way to tell someone that that's what's, my dad's dead. My dad's passed away. My dad was murdered, right? But I don't know why. Like, even now, I don't know why that was the case. But I understand it was probably just some sort of subconscious thing of maybe trying to get someone to understand me or who I am, quite quickly, to be like, I'm this broken person, even though I wasn't really a broken person in terms of my actual personality. But there's something broken there. There's something that's happened, that's harsh, that's unique, and maybe try and understand me because of this. Because I remember in school, it wouldn't be a case where I'd literally go like, Ben, my dad died, as soon as I met you. But it would be like, if there was something that could lead to that conversation, I would make sure it was inserted in there. So let's say if we're talking and, in school, like, people be like, your dad's gay, or whatever, like some sort of like school ground joke. And someone might say that and I'd be like, my dad's dead. You should know that. That's bad, what you said. And there's stuff like that. And when I look back, it makes me not laugh, but it's like, why did I do that? That's so strange. But it was like a subconscious thing. And yes, like the shop. And I think even to this, like, even till recently, I think I was always worried about what people would think of me, because, and it's not a bad thing my mum did, for sure, because other people have said the same thing. But like, my mum would always say how good my dad was as a person, his character, everything. Like, she's never said anything bad about him. And then that might be the case. It might be nothing bad to say. It might just be her perception. But other people have said the same. Like, I've never heard anyone say anything bad about my dad. But what I think did subconsciously, and again, I've literally over the last 2 weeks just thought about this. But I think subconsciously, I just always needed to be perfect then. I needed everyone to look at me as this saint. And if anyone ever didn't look at me as that saint, it would really get to me. Because I'm a good person. But even good people make mistakes, or, it doesn't matter how good you are. You're going to argue with people. You're going to hurt someone. You're going to betray someone in their perception, while with you, it might be a certain different perception. Like, these things are going to happen. But they would always get to me. It would always get to me like, that person doesn't like me, or this person might say something bad about me, or this person here. Especially as a social media person, you can imagine like that's like the worst thing you can imagine. But for me, I don't know why, when it came to social media, I kind of already accepted you're going to get haters. You're going to get people who say certain things about you, who make up things about you, which is fine. But that was definitely something that I think I definitely not struggled with, but like was definitely there, because I just wanted to be like my dad. I didn't want to be my dad. Everyone says I look like him, like identical. And it's really weird for me, because the real issues I've had, subconsciously, again, like not consciously, was that I didn't know what it would mean, or what it means to be a man, because I didn't have a man to teach me how to be a man. My mum did a phenomenal job. Like, I wouldn't be in the position I'm in today if it wasn't thanks to my mum. She definitely tapped into her masculine a lot to be a successful property entrepreneur, successful lawyer, the top 500 barrister, in the UK. So if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be who I am, for sure. She did an incredible job. She couldn't have done anything more, but she can't be a man. right? There's just she couldn't be a father, but she did a phenomenal job. But did it really impact me in a massive way? I don't think so. But there were definitely nuances. Like even to this day, I was saying like there was a little period I went through for about 6 months where I was depressed, but it was more so because I have this pain inside that's like I buried it up growing up, which isn't healthy, of course. But I equally didn't suffer because of it until this moment, like this thing where for the 6 months, I think it was 6 months, it might be 3 months, but like it was a period of months where I was just depressed. Like every day, anytime I'd think of something, it would literally be like tears would come to my eyes. Like I'd be walking to work and I'd start crying. I'd be at work, I'd start crying. I used to work in a call center, so I'm on a call and I'm crying, but I'm not sobbing, but it's just tears are flooding because I'm thinking. And normally the thoughts would be like, you don't know what your dad's voice sound like. How can you be a man when you don't know what a man is, or no one's taught you how to be a man? How could you be a good father when you don't know what a father is, and so on? So I'd have these thoughts and it would make me feel that way. And I remember one day I just woke up and I just literally woke up and said, I don't want to feel this way no more. Like, that's it. And it just stopped. It was like a switch off. Maybe it was just me sealing up that barrier. Because the other day, I don't think like that way anymore. But the other day I was watching a clip, and normally that's how it happens, like a certain music, certain clip. I was watching a short on YouTube. I was doing research. I was trying to find like different music and stuff to try and use. But then this short came up, and it was this kid who looked like he was probably like 5 or 6 years old. And I think it was his dad who was opposite him. And his dad asked him like, are you mad at God for giving you cancer? He had cancer. So are you mad at God for giving you cancer? And the kid goes, no. And he goes, why? And he goes, because if it wasn't me, it could have been my sister. He says his sister's names. He was like, could have been my sister's. And I wouldn't want them to go through this pain. And then tears started coming to my eyes because I was just thinking, like, that's some savagery. And then it was just taking me back to like that pain, because you're associating that pain, you're resonating with that pain. And then I just spent like, I don't know, half an hour where I was watching other clips. It sent me on a spiral. I was watching other clips of like sadness and resonating with it. Like, there's always one clip that always sits with me because The Lion King, I've always said the Lion King Disney movie, the cartoon, the original, is like the story of my life. Like literally is the exact story of my life. Because obviously Simba and then Mufasa dies. He gets killed by his brother, which essentially is what happened with me. My dad was killed by his brother-in-law. So it's the exact same concept, right? And then like Simba doesn't know who he is. His dad's gone. And then there's that one scene where, he looks up in the sky and his dad's there in the clouds and his dad's there like, you've forgotten who you are and therefore forgotten me. And then I think I used to put that a lot of that again, resonating back is like, I just wanted to be perfect. I wanted to be this perfect image like my dad was. And I think I was setting myself up for failure when you do that, because you can never be perfect. You're just setting yourself up to really struggle mentally or like within yourself. And I wouldn't sit there and say that I struggled mentally with it because I've always been someone who's been quite confident. Again, thanks to my mum probably. But I've always been someone who's quite confident, believed in myself. But there was a period of time where I wanted to be loved. Like I wanted everyone to love me and everyone to think of me as a good person because I am a good person. But that's just, again, setting yourself up for failure because you could, even nowadays, like even with my own family, like my own siblings, for example, I'm very ruthless with how I think and my beliefs. And so like going back to the social media stuff, I have family members, for example, who want to get into social media. They're always talking about it. They always start and stop. And I know friends like that as well. So when I talk on my stories about like, if you want to be successful at whatever you want, you need to be consistent, And I say like, I know people who say this and they do this. And then I had a family member reach out to me just last night, to be fair. And they were saying, like, I feel personally attacked. As a joke, they were saying it like, I feel personally attacked because they know that they've done the same thing that I was talking about. And I didn't respond with like, haha. I just responded like, yeah, it's you and a million other people. Like, I'm just brutal. Mm. And I know they don't like it.
Truth hurts.
Yeah. And I know they probably don't like it, but in my opinion, it's like, don't come to me if you think I'm going to be like, haha, I don't believe in none of that shit. I don't care what you got going on. Like, I get it. Like, life is hard in the beginning. Like, it was hard for me starting the podcast. I had a bunch of stuff going on, but like, there's no excuse. Like, it's like I said to them person, they said to me, I've got this, and this, like these things take up all my time. I'm exhausted by the end of the day. And I'm like, there's no perfect time. That's what I replied to them. Like, there's no perfect time. And then they just put like, thumbs up, I was like, yeah. Look, I'm not the guy to try and get like,
the sympathy.
Yeah, the sympathy or like you're right. Maybe one day. Fuck all that. Like, there is no one day. It's day one, which is today.
You mentioned dad being killed, not your dad dying. And then you said he died in the shop that you had.
Yeah.
And then you've later on gone to say that your brother and his brother,
His brother-in-law, yeah.
so your dad's brother-in-law
Yeah.
murdered him in the shop that you then went on to own.
Yeah.
What happened with that?
I think that was hard for my mum, so as you can imagine, my mum didn't talk a lot about it growing up because probably one, very, very hard for her, but two, like probably wasn't necessary for us kids to know the details.
And is that your mum's brother?
Yeah, my mum's brother, yeah.
So your mum's brother killed your dad.
My training routine has always been a big part of my life, and managing recovery and injury prevention has never been more of a focus of mine. Trying to maintain energy for the long sessions whilst making sure my mind is also kept on top form to continue all of the commitments that my schedule demands. That's why having the support of Harvinder at Glasshouse Pharmacy has been a real game changer. Harvinder has been with us from the very start, regularly topping me and the team up with the latest state-of-the-art IV drips. These treatments really are the real deal, used by elite athletes, entrepreneurs, and even cancer patients to boost performance, aid recovery, and keep you going strong. Whether it's improving sleep, enhancing overall health, or even supporting symptoms related to the menopause, Harvinder and his team have got something for everyone. And just for the Heart of It listeners, Harvinder has put together something special. To claim your exclusive offer, go to theheartofitpodcast.com/sponsors, where you can download the Get IV offer. Thanks to Harvinder and Glasshouse Get IV for helping us stay healthy, energized, and keeping the podcast running strong. And since being a guest on the podcast, Harvinder and our team have been working on Harvinder's very own podcast, Behind the Symptoms, where Harvinder discusses all the IV drips and their health benefits, amongst much more. If you want to check out Behind the Symptoms, you can. Just visit theheartofitpodcast.com/Behind the Symptoms. Thanks to Harvinder again.
So your mum's brother killed your dad.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
So long story short, he had schizophrenia. He'd smoke a lot of weed, which would then bring on schizophrenic episodes, which some would argue the weed didn't cause the schizophrenia, but brought it on. Some might argue the schizophrenia was there and the weed just enhanced it, right? I don't know. But yeah, so growing up, I knew what happened growing up. I knew how it happened, who had done it, but I didn't know details, right? I found out details later because there were obviously police reports on it, and I remember searching it. I don't know why I was searching it. Fascinating. I want to know. But that's why my mum went through a very hard time because that's probably her story to tell. I probably should get her on here so she can tell that story. But yeah, she went through a lot of crazy, even now, crazy PTSD simply because she saw my dad afterwards. She saw his physical body. She was, I think, the first person to see it. So
since she walked in on the scene?
Yeah, she went to the scene. So basically, that shop, our house was around the corner from the shop. So my dad was working, and he had my mum's brother had gone there and done what he did, and then someone obviously must have gone to the shop, didn't see my dad there, went to my house, knocked on the door, and said, "Oh, so and so's not in the shop." My dad's name is Zuffer. Zuffer was not in the shop. They used to call him George, actually. So George in the shop, they would create a nickname.
Yeah.
So which is when I in the shop, I called it George and Sons. As a little homage thing. But yeah, so George in the shop. So my mum went round, obviously, felt something was off, of course. Went there, saw her brother running away, and then went in the back behind the little alleyway behind the shop, and he was there. So very, very hard for her, even to this day. And she went through a lot to protect us as children because.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 5. My older sister was 9, I think, 8 or 9. My younger sister was 3, 2 or 3. So my mum, you can imagine, 26 years old, I think, 3 kids on her own, just lost her husband. Absolute savage. Honestly, absolute. I can't imagine. I struggle, and I've got me and my wife, and I've got my businesses, and I not struggle, but that's a lot of thing to handle for me. So I can't imagine if you lost a spouse, right, in a very tragic circumstance, which you've seen, and so you've got all this trauma to handle, and you've got these 3 young kids at a time in particular where Asian women weren't as independent, women in general weren't as independent, and weren't as sort of propped up in society, right? Even to this day, that's still happening, right? But especially back then. And yet she pushed herself and basically lived for us to to build us into who we are and to provide for us.
Was she already a barrister at that time?
No, she was meant to start her training at that time. I think she had to drop out for a year so she could work and stabilize things, and then she went back.
As you said, your mum really did a lot for you.
Exactly, yeah. 100%. That's why I always say, like, I wouldn't be who I am without my mum. And it was really weird, actually. Me and my mum had this little thing a couple of years ago where we kind of like butted heads. It was quite bad, but I think it was more so just like a subconscious thing from that pain, you know, for her from that pain, and then for me, stubbornness probably from that pain. That we just didn't realize that we're just butting heads, but we're completely fine now. But yeah, in terms of that circumstance, that was just why that happened though. Why my mum's brother-in-law did that was simply because he was having those schizophrenic episodes, and he had one where he was, and I was there actually, which is weird because the memory's still there, so I could still picture like what was happening at the time. But I was probably 4 or 5 years old. It must have been around the same time, maybe a couple months before this, or maybe just before this. But anyway, he had a knife behind his back. He was in like the kitchen of the house, and everyone was like, you know, put the knife down or what's behind your back or whatever it may be. And I was behind him, so I could see the knife. But I was a kid. Obviously, I don't know what's going on. But I remember grabbing his wrist, trying to pull it down, pull the knife down, basically. But as a kid, I was probably just doing it in a play, probably thinking he's playing or hiding something behind his back. Anyway, that was probably like the wake-up call, you know, because like a lot of Asian, I don't know about other sort of cultures, but in Asian culture, they want to always hide things. They don't want to address things. Like even to this day, I see it within not my family as much, but my in-laws' family and just families I observe. But they always want to hide things, and I don't know why. But it's like they always want to hide it. They don't want people to know. Shame for sure, and pride, you know. But they want to hide it. But I think that was the red flag, and my dad put his foot down. My mum and dad at the time were like the leaders of both sides of the family. My dad's side and my mum's side, the providers, the ones people would lean on for support, etc., because they were very progressive thinkers and hard workers, and built something. Were starting to build something. So my dad had said, like, you need to get him help, right? There's something wrong with him. He needs to get help. That's it. Very, you know, it's nothing malicious about it. Just he needs to get help. So they got him checked into QMC, which is the hospital here in Nottingham, in the psych ward. But back then they didn't have locks on the doors in the hospitals. And this actual case was the reason why they put locks on doors. But so he's in hospital. They're meant to do evaluations on him, but his friends come to visit, and they take him out of the hospital. They must smoke up. Here's then voice in his head, and this is from police reports afterwards. The voice in his head telling him, Zufar, as in my dad, he's trying to get you taken away from your family. He's trying to do this. He's trying to do that. So that's where it stems from. You know, his voice told him, go take him out, basically. He's trying to harm you. He's trying to take you away. He's trying to convince everyone you're a bad person, wherever those voices may be. So then he goes and does what he does. So that's where it stems from. Yeah, that's what happened with that circumstance. And then, and then that's where my need for that shop, you know, and which again, it was very selfish of me to do that, and I didn't see it at the time. But imagine me taking on that shop for my selfish reason of wanting to, you know, fulfill those shoes, but then making my mum go to that shop after obviously what she had to experience, you know.
What happened to your uncle?
He went to a mental hospital, you know, like it's not prison, is it? Mental hospital, like asylum, if you will, but only for 2 years. You know, then he was let out, which I didn't find out for like a long time, you know.
Does the family have a relationship with him now?
Not my family, not me and my mum. So at that time, my mum, and again, my mum should really tell this story because I don't know the finer details, which, But anyway, she had to take us, like me and my two sisters, just away from everyone because it was just so toxic. People were trying to rob her, like rob the shop and the things that my dad had built, using her being a woman as a crutch to try and do that. And they did it as well. They did it, and it was certain. Like my mum managed to keep that shop safe and that property safe, but there were other stuff that this, you know, guess who it would have been? It would have been my mum's other brother-in-law, you know, who was doing that sort of stuff.
So your mum had two brothers?
My mum had, this is my mum's brother-in-law then, yeah? So my mum's sister's husband.
Got you.
Sorry. It gets like that, you know?
Yeah, but it was your mum's brother.
My mum's brother who did that to my dad.
Got you.
But then the person who was trying to do all this pain afterwards.
Was her sister's husband.
Exactly, yeah. Which is crazy, right? It's crazy. You don't expect this from family, but yeah, vultures essentially, you know? So my mum had to protect us. You know, she was getting like from anonymous from anonymous places, which again we assign to similar people, of like, you know, we're going to take your kids away, we're going to attack you, you know. So my mum's there not sleeping at all, thinking, you know, someone's going to try and attack us and take us away from her. And, you know, she's basically getting attacked from all fronts, not only from a, say, monetary perspective, but also from a psychological perspective, also from a cultural perspective, in terms of like, you know, all she's being told then by everyone in the family is to remarry straight away, you know, or to be a housewife and go on benefits, you know. You know, who's going to look after your kids if you go and work? And my mum's like, well, if I go on benefits, what sort of life are my kids going to have? You know, what am I going to be able to provide for my kids doing that? If I remarry, what's that going to do? You know, so she had to put her foot down. You know, and that, again, not even just at that time, as we just talked about, the culture thing is so weird. You know, the shame and the guilt and you know, the lack of independence, especially for the females, is still there. It's still there.
When you say culture thing, is it Asian? What is your background?
Asian, yes, Pakistani, Muslim, Pakistani, but it's probably shared along like Bangladesh, like a lot of cultures, to be fair. You know, like I said, it's my experience, but I'm sure it probably happens in white households too, you know, but I just wouldn't know. But especially in Asian cultures, it's very, very strong. And she had to put her foot down. So she took us away from all those family members, you know, took us away from all of them, even to this day. So I have the classic, you know, Asian and Pakistani sort of family. Like, probably got like a shit ton of cousins and uncles and aunties. I do have them, but I don't know any of them. I don't even know their names. I've got cousins my age. I probably walk past them in town. You know, I don't even know what they look like, which to me isn't weird. But obviously, as you can imagine, to everyone else, it's pretty strange. Because I see most Asian, they're very close knit, you know, very, very unit oriented. Every family has their thing, of course, little drama here and there, but like they're very close. Well, mine's the complete opposite, and it's served me in a way, but also I'm sure has its negatives, because I'm very cutthroat with people. Like, if I don't like someone, or if someone does me dirty, even if it's what seems small, I will get rid of them in a heartbeat. And I've done that through this journey as podcaster as well. But
if someone shows themselves, believe them the first time.
Yeah, exactly. That's the sort of mentality I have. And you know, people try and tell me, oh, you know, you shouldn't be like that, whatever. But it's just, I don't think so. I think for me, it's how it serves me, you know. But I also had to learn when getting married, of course, and sort of my wife's from the same background, and she has a large family, you know. So I had to get used to it, and it was hard to get used to. I won't lie. Like I probably made it harder for my wife than I had to, because I was just so used to like, nah, I don't like that person. No, you're not going to spend time with them. I'm not going to spend time with them. And we're going to limit how much time we spend time with them. My kids ain't going to spend time with them. And that's controlling. And that's where, like, that's where, to be fair, like, you could sit there again when I say I want to be known as a good person, but that's something that is a subconscious sort of belief that was there, that was creating a negative impact onto my wife, which other people could observe and say, like, yeah, that's a controlling husband right there. But it was just something I had to work through. You know, thankfully, my wife allowed me to work through it. To a point where I was able to observe what was going on, you know.
That's self-awareness, though, isn't it, on your part?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it just takes time to build that. Sometimes you need other people's help to see it as well. But yeah, thankfully my mum took us away from all those people. But those other family members we took ourselves away from, they went and saw him. They had communication with him, which, to be fair, says everything about them. You know, it says everything about them to do that. And don't get me wrong, I get it. It's their brother, it's their son, it's their whatever. But, you know, you can't be sad or mad that we don't want anything to do with you, for example.
No.
You know, like, you have to choose. You choose your side, that's fine. But no, we're not making you choose. You know, we're already away and doing our thing. And I'm happy about it, to be fair. You know, I'm happy about it, to be fair. It's all I know, to be fair, as well.
You mentioned how strong of a woman your mum is and how she raised you. How do you think that has affected your relationship with your wife?
I think it was, it's been good. I think it's been good because it's on two sides, I guess, because I think in one sense, it's like it's easy to have a certain expectation as well. But in another sense, it was good to have a reference of a good woman. So even though if I didn't have a good reference of a good man, for example, or direct one anyway, I had one of a woman. I had the most perfect example of a woman. And not to say my woman's perfect in any way, right? Everyone has their clicks. Like we said, we butted heads at one point. And I think that was more so, like I said, that subconscious stuff and probably a bit of pride there, a bit of ego there, probably a mixture of all sorts on both sides, you know, on both sides. Mainly mine, though. As a son, though, I should have been the one to to take more of the steps. But I think I've got this very big stubborn nature, which me and Mum were laughing about it the other day. Actually, it was like I probably get it from her, so that's probably why we were doing it, because she wasn't being stubborn. It was my job as the son to step forward, but I was being stubborn, which I probably get from her, which is funny. But yeah, in terms of my wife though, like I think it's just having that example, of someone, of what I would look for in a wife, in a partner. I had a really strong example, and it's not even about entrepreneurship. So like I didn't have any want for my wife to be an entrepreneur. I was happy for her if she wants to be an entrepreneur, but I just needed someone who would be like a solid rock, just like my mum was and still is, to be fair. To this day, for me, you need someone to replicate that, which is a hard thing to do.
I was going to say, big shoes to step into.
Yeah, so she might have had the similar thing that I had, but no, thankfully my wife has done that. She's done that, and she's put up with me a hell of a lot. I put her through, I wouldn't say like from my perspective, like crazy bad stuff, but from her perspective, it will be.
Like what?
Just like I was addicted to weed. Before I met her, I'd stopped for a bit, but it was still there. It was still lingering there. I'd moved to London, so when I'd met her, I'd moved to London. So then in London, I didn't have any dealers, if you will. So it was like, it wasn't out of choice. I didn't have any choice, But then when I married her, I moved back to my home city. So then the choices were there again. So I started doing it again. And then obviously through that, you lie. And through lying, it just creates trust issues. And to you, it might seem small. So to me, it might seem small. It's like, it's just weed, and it's just, yes, I've lied, but it's just weed, but lying is a big thing. It's that element of trust, and especially when it's a life partner, it's trust is everything in a life partner, right? So if you've done that, that does something to their psychological thing, because it's like, if I'm being completely 100% honest with you, and we're partners here, and you don't want to be 100% honest with me, what does that mean? Like, what do you think of me? Stuff like this. But that was the main one. That was really the only one, was that. That was really the big thing, was just weed. It was just lying, stuff about that sort of stuff, which again, to me was like, it's nothing, it's weed. But why would I lie about it then? It was just more so, I didn't want to be rejected. I didn't want her to say like, okay, can I smoke weed? And she say no. Then I'd probably go do it anyway, right?
But once you start doing it in one area, it gives that person the doubt.
It gives them the doubt, but equally, it's like the same thing. It's like, if you can do it in that area, what's stopping you from doing it in another area too? And it can be a spiral if you let it be, and it probably leads to that. But in reality as well, I didn't need to smoke weed. Like when I stopped smoking weed properly, that is literally when I started to really work hard, and success started to really find me then.
I don't know if you can recall, you told me a story before about when you first found out you were pregnant, your wife and you found out you were pregnant, and then you put your last 5K in a trading account.
Yeah, so like, it was interesting. So I had the 5K in an account already, and I was doing all right. I was like going up and down. It wasn't like crazy. I didn't have like a fixed strategy.
When you say up and down, just for
so I was like going up like $1,000 here, $1,000 down. So I was trading.
As in, you had £5,000 in a trading account, and you were trading, making some profit, and then making some losses.
Making some losses. It was like going up and down quite consistently. I was on my honeymoon when I started it. So I was in like Canada when I put the 5K in an account, and I was trading it. And I didn't really have like a strong edge. So to be profitable in the markets, you need to have like an edge. It's essentially the easiest way for your audience to understand is like literally like poker, right? Or roulette, if you will, or 21. It's all probability based. Like, so as long as you have a probabilistic edge in the markets, you can be profitable. So at this point, I didn't really have a strong edge. I just had something that seemed to work, and I was just doing it. But it was working, right? I was making $1,000 here. I was making $2,000 there. I was making $4,000 there. I was losing $1,000 there. I was losing $2,000. So it was pretty much like up and down, back to balance again, constantly. But I was taking out $1,000 here, $2,000 there, like small amounts. Well, at the time, obviously, were large amounts because I didn't have a job, so I was just doing that. So that was doing all right. And then I found out that we were pregnant a month after we got married. Which a funny story I would very briefly say is that me and my wife met each other on Instagram. We were talking. I didn't know what she looked like. She didn't have any pictures on there, so I could have been a bloke for all I knew, right? But we were just chatting. We were chatting. And we met like 2 months later, I think, three months later, maybe for the first time. Met each other another like 4 or 5 times. Within 6 months, we got married, right? And then 2 months after we got married, she was pregnant, right?
Is that a case of when you know, you know?
Yeah. It literally was, yeah. because a lot of people assume it must have been like an arranged marriage, right? But it literally wasn't. Like it was a case where I had written down in a book, and this was an exercise my mum gave me, which was like, write down everything in detail what you want. Yeah, everything. So from characteristics to looks, you name it, everything in a book, little notebook I got. I wrote it in there and then just leave it. You don't need to go read it again every day or anything like that. You just write it down, put it in the ether, and leave it. And I did that, and within like a month, we came across each other. But the funny thing is, she followed me for years, and we followed each other for years, for like 2-3 years, I would say, before we decided to speak. And I've done that exercise, and then for some reason we decided to speak.
Did she match those things?
Yeah, to a T. There was only one thing missing.
What was the one thing?
It was like green eyes or something I put.
It's really interesting. When you started telling me that story, it's very similar to Elena Cardone, Grant Cardone's wife. In the book Building the Empire, she says she wrote a list exactly like that. And the only thing that Grant didn't have was I think it was height. He's 5'10", and the eye colour. And her friend said, everything on this list you want, these two materialistic things.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, my wife has, she doesn't have green eyes, but she has like unique eyes. Like they're very light brown, while a lot of Asian people have very dark brown eyes. So she still ticked a box, you know. But yeah, like I tell anyone who ever says to me they're looking to get married or they want to find a partner, I literally just tell them, look, don't stress about it. Write it, every detail in a book and just leave it. And I guarantee you within a month or two, you'll find that person will just come, right? Like they'll just fall into your life. They're probably already there. You know, you need that. But yeah, 100%. That exercise is amazing. But yeah, in terms of the trading side, just to finish that off, up and down. Wife's pregnant. I should be then more responsible. Still don't have a job at the time. Don't have any savings. Nothing. I don't know why she married me. But up and down. And then there was one trade where I literally just blew the whole lot. I had like $8,000 in the account, and I just broke the golden rule of trading, which is no stop loss, right? Which means like not having a fixed amount that you can lose, right? And just oversizing, meaning I was putting too much risk on the trade.
I have been there.
Yeah, exactly. Blown, right? I remember seeing there, the craziest thing is, it's in big drawdown, so it's in huge loss, 6,000. I'm staying awake all night, as you can imagine. My laptop's on, I'm looking at it, staring at it. At one point during that night, it came to a 3K loss, right? And I know in my head, it was like, close it.
In your mind, yeah. So for people who don't know, you place a trade. I'm not certainly an expert trader. I have traded a little bit. I'm far too emotional because I don't see it as pips. I see it as money in the bank. And it starts, as soon as you place a trade, obviously you get some fees placing the trade often unless you're on a big account. So immediately it's in like a drawdown, which means negative, like you're losing money. And then it starts to do its thing up and down. We see the sort of market moving. And then suddenly something happens if it goes bad. It starts to go off the curve. And like you see it going red. And it starts like, it always looks like a warning light going red. You start seeing the number at the top, it's money that's just going bigger and bigger. And what happens is the market, like, you know, people see the up and down for people to see the lines. You see the lines or the bars. And then what happens is the market will pull back the other way. And as you're describing, from what I understand, it pulled back up to a £3,000 loss. Yeah. And at that moment, you think, but just a little bit more, I'm going to get out at zero. It should keep going. But then what happens is often it turns back round. Yeah. And then you're like, oh no, come back. And without a stop loss being guaranteed only lose this amount of money, didn't have one on. So the whole account just went.
It's just gone, yeah. So it's just gone. So then I remember I was just like so deflated, you know. I was just so deflated. I have a journal at the time. I still have it. I do it from periodically now. But I had a journal. It was basically a diary. And I remember writing in there, like, I was just so down for like 3-4 days. I just felt so deflated. And then I had to go get a job, you know. And that's when I worked in Chunky Chicken in town, which is like essentially a KFC, like a chicken shop, basically. And I worked there, cash in hand, you know, worked there. And I've always said, though, like, regardless of what happens in my life, I will go work a job anytime. You know, like, do I want to? Probably not. But if I had to, if all things failed, you know, I would happily go work a job. And that's always been my mentality. But yeah, I had to go get a job. You know, I had to humble myself. I had to start taking more responsibility. I had to go get the job. Had to start trying to save. You know, and bear in mind, this was, like I said, Chunky Chicken, so it wasn't like I could save a lot. I was literally saving maybe £100, £200 a month. You know, and bear in mind, kids coming. But that getting married and having a kid They were the things that changed me and made me who I was, who I needed to become. Those were the things that made me fill those shoes in the end. Those were the things. It wasn't the success. It wasn't the, trying to be an entrepreneur or what people thought of me or how I looked in other people's eyes or anything to do with that, or me trying to replicate my father. It was none of that. It was literally just getting responsibility on my shoulders, And I say it so often now, like if anyone who's like 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever it may be, the best thing you can do isn't any success or any of that, is literally just get more responsibility, right? So if you live at home with your parents, start paying bills, right? Not bills that are like a phone bill. You should be doing that anyway if it's your phone bill, right? It should be like, okay, you're at home and you got a job, start paying money that you don't want to pay, because you'd rather have the comfort of it being yours and going to chill and going to things that you want to spend on. But if you're living at home, do that. If you're not living at home, that's great, because then hopefully you're paying rent, right? And you're starting to feel that responsibility, because that's what changed me, having that responsibility and that weight on my shoulders, which again is how you view things, right? A lot of people might have seen that weight as a pressure and then let it crumble them and use it as a way to victimize themselves and say like, but I have no money and I've got this wife and kid and I have no money, so I can't do anything. But instead you can use that to say, I've got this wife and kid and I've got no fucking money. I need to go out there and go make something of myself and make some money, right? And build the life that we want to build. So it's how you frame things. But my advice to everyone is like, just get responsibility. Like literally, like those younger years, how people say like, don't waste them. Like, because you're meant to enjoy them as well. Like, because you only got one life. Like I enjoyed myself, but I worked hard as well at the same time. But your life will elevate and your mind will elevate when you take more responsibility, when you add that pressure, and you add it knowing that what you're trying to do. Don't get me wrong, like sometimes you get pressure that you did not expect. And that can be easy. It's easy to allow that pressure to crumble you because you didn't expect it. It's kind of like a low blow. But again, it's how you just choose to use it. Like it's like diamonds, right? They're only made for immense pressure, right? And same with any successful person. You look at any successful person, they had to face fear and they had to get over adversity. There's not a single successful person who did not face adversity in some shape or form, right? It might not even be business adversity. It might not be failure in business. It might have been that they got abused as a kid. It might be that they got bullied so immensely, right? It might be anything like that. It might have been, David Goggins, he was racially abused, He was considered dumb, right? He was considered too fat and too old for the Marines. But look at him.
Who's going to carry the boats?
Exactly, And it's that mentality. It's just that mentality of taking the boats, right? The pressure, the weight, and who's going to do it? There's no one else who's going to do it for you. And it's the thing that's going to make you who you need to be. I truly think that pain, suffering, adversity is the fuel to success. Like that's the things that you lean on. And it doesn't have to be like crazy pain, like the trauma I went through or what my mum from. It doesn't have to be that. But if it is that, so be it. Right?
You often do find those highly successful people do have a backstory, even if they haven't told it. There's some significant pain or trauma that's been the fuel to drive them. Otherwise, where does it come from? I don't know. I'm sure there are people out there who've had a great life and had a great childhood. But most of the people I know who've been successful, who do talk about it, have had something of note.
100%. I think it's just necessary, It's absolutely necessary. And again, there's levels to it. It doesn't have to be massive, right? But just lean on it. Because I think, not because of social media, I don't know what it is. I think like the way society is built up nowadays is like there is a lot of instant gratification. I'm guilty of it as well in terms of like the phones. Like the phones are like my biggest enemy. It's always been my biggest enemy, but it's also been my biggest, friend in a way as well, because it's thanks to social media that I've built, been able to do what I've done, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like this blessing and a curse at the same time. But that instant gratification is what is causing, I think, a lot of young people when I speak to them, because I don't speak to them often, only when I come across them, or mainly it's when it's, family friends or friends of family or whatever it may be, who have younger people who, if I'm in their vicinity, I try and ask them a question like, what do you plan to do with your life? I don't know why I always ask that, because at that age, it's not probably the first thing on their mind. But a lot of the time, it's like, why don't you do this? It takes too long. Why don't you do this? It's hard, It's just like, okay, but like, what else are you going to do? Like, what is it? But the weird thing is they always want the things. They want to be able to travel to here. They want to be able to live there.
But they don't want to go through what they have to go through. My friend came on, Gemma, she spoke about my story a bit on the podcast when she spoke. And she said, people want to have what you have, but they would not want to go through what you went through to
Exactly.
get there. You mentioned social media there. The trappings of success definitely got me in the past, or shall I say, I caved to the trappings of success. Social media's been really pretty pivotal in your life. Meeting your wife on Instagram, all of your businesses through social media and digital sort of pursuits, and now with all the things you're doing going forward, the trappings of getting viral views. How does that play? And you said about a reel getting 1 million views. There's that dopamine that goes off when you see that video starting to take off.
There is. And in the beginning, I think I've always been lucky in the sense that I had Josh, my editor, like I said, that rock, because he has always said from day one, before we were ever on any sort of level, he's always said, and I don't know how he knew it, to be fair. I don't know if he'd worked with certain people or he just knew it, but like he said about the guest, like there'll be one guest who pushes you over. He also said that don't worry about the views. Like never watch the views. Like it doesn't matter if you get massive views or low views, it does not matter. You just keep going. That's the game. And so thanks to that, I've never really watched the views. We've had some phenomenal months. We've had dips. We've had things that we've faced adversity. We've had hardship. We've had a cancelable moment, if you will. But I think I've just had the right people, the right people around me, and I've shared in the mindset that they've also shared as well. Because I've never really watched the views. Because if I did, in those first 20 episodes, I would have stopped.
What happened? What happened with the cancelable moment?
Cancelable moment. We had a company I was partnered with in the trading space, and it collapsed mainly because of the partners who were running it, but also because of circumstances within the market. So not to point fingers fully there, but they also circumstances in the market with people managing it incorrectly, who should have had the experience based on their resume, if you will, and how they promote themselves. And it collapsed. But I was like one of the faces of it. So you can imagine there was a lot of hurt people, a lot of damaged people, and rightly so, pointing fingers. Didn't quite understand the behind the scenes of it, but regardless, pointing fingers. But we handled it well. We handled it well. And we got through that, While other partners who were also faces of it, one handled it well, one didn't. One completely disappeared from the scene. And I think it was probably that mental fortitude, that mental sort of, what's the right word for it?
Resilience.
Resilience, but it's like it's right there, but it's not coming out. But essentially, it's that maturity, right? Having that mental maturity to understand what's going on and to sort of navigate it correctly, right? So yeah, but thankfully I've been through social media drama before, not on a huge scale. This was probably a bit more bigger scale, more directed at me. But my whole thing, and that again, so like, it's so what I lean on, and I would always say this to anyone in the social media space who goes, or even just generally in life, right? If you make what people might deem as a mistake, or people are pointing fingers at you, or they don't have all the information. What matters most always is your intention. What was your intention? As long as you know your intention was pure and you went out there to do good and try to do a good thing and provide value, that's all that matters, right? As long as your family know that too, or the people that you care about know that too, that's all that matters, right? It doesn't mean those people are wrong in what they're saying. They're just going off what they believe. They're going off their pain and emotions, or their emotions. They're going off what narrative they've been told. And that's fine. You just got to leave them to it. Don't there's no back and forth that needs to be done, but just be secure in yourself to know that you've done what you thought was right. You've done what you thought would help, and that's it. Because my whole thing has always been, because of my dad in particular, is like my legacy, right? That's why, always wanted people to think good of you. So you can imagine, obviously, going through some these sort of circumstances, it's easy to get really caught up in that. So it's just allowing yourself to not get caught up in it. Understand that. I actually had advice from Raja Banks, that guy I told you about. He said, think about it this way. You've now got the perfect audience, meaning that you're going to always have people who are going to comment on your stuff and hate on you, and you're always going to have people who are going to love you, right? So now there's always going to be people engaging on your content. And I was like, so true. I don't think like that, And then that's why it's good to have people around you, good to have people who can just help you think in different ways. And that's where I think like the whole mastermind concept from Napoleon Hill comes from, is like, that's what it is. You will think in a certain way, which is beneficial too. And it probably has some validity and points to it that other people could value from. but then you might think of it the exact same thing in a certain different way, and you might be able to share that with me, and I'll learn from that, and that might help me overcome something.
Yeah, I love mastermind.
Yeah,
Absolutely love it. And I think people is the answer in all things, like the people you have in your team, in your life, close people, like you mentioned, your wife, how important she was to your success, team editors. Those people, I think, are vital in success, but just in life in general. So we talked a little bit about, well, you've talked a lot about your past, talked about your present. From where you are now with Words of Wisdom, and you've got some new channels that you've recently even started. Tell us a bit more about what the future looks like.
As most of you know, my diet is pretty strict most of the time, so it makes it even more important to me that when I have a cheat meal, it delivers. There is nothing worse than ordering a takeaway and it being wrong, missing items, or just not being what you expected or you hoped for. That's why having the support of Kasim from Bombay Joe's Bingham has been a game changer. Kasim has been a supporter of the podcast from the very beginning, providing all the food for the launch party. And we recently went to see Kasim and the team at Bombay Joe's Bingham, a takeaway restaurant that's a modern-inspired take on Indian street food. Opening 6 days a week, 5 p.m. till late, based in Bingham, Nottingham, and can deliver to a wide radius, including West Bridgeford, serving all of your favourite curries and classic Indian dishes. Kasim has got you covered. And Kasim has put together an exclusive offer just for To The Heart of It listeners. To claim your exclusive offer from Kasim, just visit theheartofitpodcast.com/sponsors, where you can download the Bombay Joe's Bingham app and get your exclusive offer code. And as a thank you to Kasim, our team has put together a special social media pack, which you can check out on their social media on Instagram at Bombay Joe's Bingham, where you can find their latest menus and give them a follow.
Tell us a bit more about what the future looks like.
the future. Now, Words of Wisdom, like we've got a new style of content that we're going to bring to Words of Wisdom as well. It's along the same line of podcasts and storytelling, but it's just like an additional thing that we can bring to the table. That I think a lot of podcasts could probably do maybe if they wanted to, but just generally as well, it's just something that we want to bring to our industry. Because again, like obviously since I've started, you can imagine there's a lot of competitors, there's no competition in reality in terms of like it's just you versus you, of course, and you just got to focus on yourself. But at the end of the day, there's still other people out there who are doing the same thing, and you need to just try and be different as well, you know? Because equally, like those people are copying what I'm doing, which is not a problem, but sometimes they just copy. They don't innovate on top, which is, I don't care personally. I don't think it makes a difference to me. But for them, like it's for them really. Like you want to make your own brand. You want to be known for something for yourself, you know? So anyway, we're trying to just always innovate. So we got that. And then we got something called the Day Trading Show, which is going to be huge. Like, I think that will probably end up overlapping the podcast channel, probably maybe in next year. I think it might overlap. Right now it's on 30K subs. We started in March. We haven't been like crazy consistent with it just because we've been so busy, but now we are. Like we're just every week an episode's going out.
It's a daily trading show.
The Day Trading Show.
The Day Trading Show.
It's like a comedy show.
Is this with the Gucci Trader?
The Gucci Trader, yeah.
Absolutely.
So like, it's essentially just there's entertainment in terms of like short form, but there's no long form entertainment videos or dedicated channel for entertainment within the trading space. So that's what we're building out, and it's going to be massive. Like we got some huge like we've got a production project in February next year. That's going to cost us about 150 to 200K to put together. But it's going to blow everything. Like there's never been levels in our industry or generally on YouTube. Yeah, on YouTube. Like we're going to be doing like Netflix, you know, BBC, like proper TV production level series. That's going to be recorded in February.
To do with trading?
Yeah. It's like a trading TV show, if you will, but highly entertaining. We've already done one, to be fair, in February in Miami, and that's still in editing process because of that company thing that I just mentioned. That it's just got delayed massively, but that's going to be out before the end of the year. And then we got the big one in February. So they're the two focuses right now. I've got one more channel, and then one more company that we're starting at the moment. One's a YouTube channel again within trading. The other one's a company, more of a not a video-based content company, but another content style of company. But again, within trading, so it's all trading related. I have had thoughts. I want to get into Misfits boxing next year, though, just for the fun of it. I've always loved boxing, so I want to get into the social media boxing next year, just for myself. Try and raise some money for charity. To be fair, I'm doing a marathon in 2 weeks. And as you can probably tell, I'm not like the most in shape guy, but I just needed some. And I've always been like, I used to be in shape. So back in the day, when I had the shop, for example, I was in the gym every day, same gym, every single day. I lived there. You know, it was my whole thing. I was really in shape. And then when I moved to London and the failure of the shop, I kind of just let myself just stop. I just basically was eating the same, but I stopped going gym. That's not a good combo after a long period of time. So I put on a lot of weight. And then I've always just struggled to get back into it, struggled to be the consistent. I always had excuses of podcasting, travel all the time, and the routine gets broken up. So I just finally, one night, I just like, fuck it, I need to sign up to something. I need to get a goal to attack. So I signed up to a half marathon.
Is it the Robin Hood one?
It was meant to be. So this is what happened. I signed up to a half marathon, set the goal, 25K, raise 25K for charity, half marathon in 2 months' time. That's already like a big thing, or should be a big thing. Then people in my space start getting hyped up, and like one guy was like, hey, if you raise 10 grand within 24 hours, you should do a full marathon. I'll do it with you. I was like, fine, cool. Raised 10,000 in 24 hours. I said I'll do a full marathon. I don't know if that guy's going to do it or not. I've not heard from anyone since. But I've been training. Yeah, I've been training. And I've got a full marathon in I don't know, 12 days. So obviously the Robin Hood, I thought it was like 2 options. I thought it was half and full. Found out it's only half. So I'm going to have to just do a full by myself, like somewhere. I need to find like a track that I'll do. So
For charity?
For charity, yes. I'm on 20K-ish, like I said, 20K right now. But you know how it is, like in the beginning, loads of people donate, middle, not so much. And then towards the end, that's when people donate. So we're in that end stage now.
And where can people go to donate if they want them?
Just giving link. So I'll give you the link. But so we're trying to get to 50K. I'm going to hit up a bunch of these traders who come on my podcast, making all this money. I'm going to start calling them out on my story, to get them to donate some big money. Same with these trading companies as well that I work with. Like obviously, they should be donating. So I want to try and get to that 50. But even if I get to like 30, any amount really, already the 20 is amazing. But the phenomenal thing is the charity we're doing it with. Essentially, it's this guy. He's so smart. He's this guy in Pakistan. Just so happened to be Pakistan. It could have been anywhere, but it just happened to be Pakistan. But he's just so smart. He just thought of like, there's all these people making money online, all these, gurus, if you will, gurus, or whatever you want to call them, all claiming to make crazy money. Some of them probably are. But he just starts tweeting underneath their tweets like, congratulations on that 10K you said you made. Like, where's this charity? If you donate $500, we can do this, or $100, we can do this. Feed kids, build a school, whatever it may be. Have fun. That's a great strategy. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a good strategy. But I've been working with him, but like I bought him a camera, for example. I've sent them personally, like, good. We built like schools and wells with them. But the beautiful thing is he shows you, like he literally would document. Before I bought him the camera, he was still doing it on his phone. He would show you show you where your money's gone. If you send him $20, he will show you where that $20 is gone, give you receipts, show you everything. So like 90%, 95% of the money will go there because he works. He's a teacher. He teaches linguistics, so he teaches like English and stuff. So he just does it as a hobby. But he has like one member of staff who I think full time will help do the distributions and so on, which again, a salary in Pakistan is not a lot. So that's why it's 90%, 95% of the money goes to the people. And then he pays for like whatever the building costs will be to build the thing or whatever it may be. So a large portion, the majority of your money, 95%, and you can physically see it, will go there. And I love that because that's where I always struggle with a lot of these charities. Is I get it, some of them are like huge corporations or huge like businesses, and therefore the amount of costs involved are there. But I'm just never a big fan of that because you don't know where your money's going. So like with Red Nose Day, for example, like they raised, I don't know how much they've raised over the last few decades, but where's that money gone? A large portion of it probably has gone on the TV commercials and the TV, the huge day that they put on. But anyway, yeah, so we're building a lot. We've done already, they're doing a water well already, they're building a school already, they've fed a lot of kids already, and, this amount of money is going to do probably a year or 2 years worth of work, which will last generations, and I love to do that. And the main thing for me is I would love to see similar people, like in Africa, in South America, wherever it's needed, similar people like him. Because it's not like I want to just give to Pakistan. It's like one of those things where I'm Pakistani. It just seems like I've chosen him for that. It's just because he's the only one who I've seen do that. I would love to see someone do like, his is called like Hunger Relief PK. I would love to see someone do like Hunger Relief, so-and-so country, and then we do the same style of work, where we're documenting it, and, it's a passion thing, and 95% of the money goes to the place, and we can create little hubs. I'd love for that to happen, but I just don't know how to make that happen, you know. But for now, I've got him who's doing that. So I was meant to go out and see him after the marathon, but I just think my schedule might be hard to do it then. But I'll definitely go out and see him in person as well. Because I've never actually been to Pakistan. Because as you can imagine, my dad passed away, so usually when you go to Pakistan, you want some sort of like male person with you, someone who knows the place. I don't speak the language either, so I'd get absolutely fleeced there. They'll see me from a mile away, you know, and I'll definitely I won't be winning any sort of, you know, the bartering at the markets. Or anything. I won't be winning any of that.
You mentioned needing to be a master of your craft. Do you consider yourself a master of your craft as a podcaster?
Yes and no, in terms of like, yes, for sure, like the results are there. So like, I definitely know what I'm doing. I definitely put the work in to be able to say that as well. And we continuously get the results. I mean, that's a big part of it. Like a lot of people have a moment, they enjoy that moment, and then they slow down. We haven't slowed down. Like we've gone, if anything, I'm working harder now. And I always say this, like I'm working harder now than I've ever worked. While people might look at me and go, he's successful. But the only way success stays is if you maintain the level of work that you put in to get that success in the first place. And if you want to grow more, you need to put more work in. And I think that's the trick that people don't realize. And the reason I say no, though, is because there's always more to learn. There's always more levels to reach. There's always more things that I can do better, no doubt, or more efficiently, for sure. Efficiency is something that I think every business person struggles with in a sense, especially when it comes to this game, because I think it's hard to find good quality people. You know, there's some bazillion editors, there's a bazillion graphic designers, but 99% of them are shit. That's the truth. You know, I get people DMing me 24/7 every single day, multiple people. Like, I could be your new editor. And it's like, most of the time what they say is like, your edits could do with some work.
Yeah. We had one yesterday, like, do you need to upload your content? I thought, what a way to welcome yourself, criticize what we're doing.
Exactly. But then the thing is, they will send you something. You're like, cool, send me your edit. Send me what you think is better. And it's dog shit. Like, it's way worse. And noticeably, it's not even like a perception thing. The quality is completely different and way, way downgraded. And then I just destroy them. Literally, I'm just like, listen, don't ever approach anyone, not me, anyone in that manner if your work is dog shit, right? Because if it's better, cool, that makes sense, right? But even then, I wouldn't approach them in that way. Like you said, like, how are you going to criticize someone? Well, what a way to open. Instead, just be like, hey, man, I do this. But the two short form editors I have, right, and have been with me from, one of them's been with me from very early on. He was the guy who's helped to start doing shorts. He's from Kenya. Another guy from the Philippines. They approached me as well. But they approached me by giving me a clip. They approached me about literally, they sent me, hey, I watched your pod and here's a clip from your pod. And now they work with me full time. And I've gotten them loads of extra work through either my own other channels or from people I know who need short form editors. And that's how I operate. And that's how I think everyone should operate. It's like, don't go with that narrative of like, your work's shit essentially. And, you know, I can do better for you. No, here's a piece of content I've made from your thing. Without you asking me, without being told, I've made it.
It just shows they've actually gone and done some effort, gone and done some work, put themselves out there versus just firing it to anybody, probably and everybody with no thought or...
That's it, yeah. And the funny thing is, they're the only two people who've ever done that. And yet they both work with me, right? And same with another guy, actually, who does threads. So it's a different type of content, but threads on Twitter for me. Same thing. He just sent me one. It wasn't a case where it was like, pay me or look at what my other work. He literally just sent me one he had made for me to try. I tried it. So like with the first guy, the Kenyan short form editor, he sent me one. I posted it. It did well. I said to him, make me 5 by tomorrow as a test. He did 5 by tomorrow, right? Didn't tell him which ones to do. I just said, you go choose 5 by tomorrow. He did 5 by tomorrow, you know? And they all performed well. Same with the threads guy. Like, he gave me the thread. I tested it. It worked really well. We did like 500,000 views on a thread. Amazing. We're going to work together, you know? And it's that mentality. It's like just value given. And I think a lot of people expect to receive or expect to be given things or expect just doors to open without putting in any work or effort or giving something first. Because I'm a very giving person. Like with the podcast, for example, a lot of people, I don't know why, they assume like people charge for podcasts. I think there are people out there who do charge to do a podcast. And I get the concept of it, but I've never charged for one. Because I just think it's already mutually beneficial without having to do that. I get it though. Like, let's say those people, I deleted their episodes. They're the sort, I get it. If I wanted to make more money out of it, I could have said like, okay, your quality isn't up to my standard, but if you want to go on the platform, pay me 5K, pay me 10K, and I'll put you on still. I could do that, but that's
Do
not
you then I think you end up
just waters
losing.
down your
Yeah,
brand.
you end up losing what you're doing it for in the first place.
exactly. But I do know people who charge. Right, I've seen podcasts out there that charge. Not in my space, but in other spaces. And I get it, but yeah, like I've never charged for a pod because again, it's like just my job. I feel is like if I've got a guest, if they have no social following, or if they do, my job is to make your episode as big as possible. Right? That's my job, my team's job. But really, your job as the person coming is just to provide us value through our conversation, and that's it. And then we'll do the rest. But yeah, like people's mindsets, I think, can be very weird, when it comes to the exchange of value, exchange of, people want to get paid, which I get, but you can't expect to get paid or make any money until you've given something. You need to give and showcase your skill sets. So like me, like the podcast wasn't monetized for a year, probably about a whole year. Could have monetized it earlier, maybe, but it was never, I didn't even think about monetizing it when I started. I didn't even think of this as a business. I just wanted to do it. I wanted to enjoy it. And it's monetized very well, I invest a lot of it, pretty much all of it, back into the pod. Because one of the, not secrets of success, but one of the big reasons I think my channel has consistently performed very well is simply because I travel so often. Like a lot of people will go the Zoom podcast route. I don't like it. And a lot of people will just not travel and say, you need to come to me. And I get it. I do get it. Like, you're the host, cool. But equally, it's like, you want to get these guests, like, what I mean? Like, you go put some legwork in, go to them. So, like, I travel frequently to Miami, New York, and Dubai for podcasts, like, literally probably twice a year to each of them.
And you take a set with you?
No, I just hire studios. I either depends on the podcast guest. A lot in those locations in particular, like in Miami in particular, I've got a savage studio there. Even in New York, the studio itself isn't savage, but one of the engineer in the studio, really nice guy. But there's another studio in New York now that I'm going to try out next time. And then Dubai, I've got one or two that I use as well. Very good people, good quality sets. But sometimes I travel with my editor Josh, and then he'll bring the setup, and we'll go do a remote podcast in their hotel or in their house or in their wherever, in their office. So it all depends. Like, and I think the sets are cool. Like I'm building my home set now, so I might try and have a bit more in home, but still I still travel. And I don't think the set necessarily needs to be uniform, as long as you still focus on the quality. As long as your audio, your visual, your lights, as long as all of that is still on point. That's what matters most, because people. I've never seen a show where people tune in for the set. I've seen them tune in for the guest and the host, So I think you can do it anywhere. So I've got a huge tour. I'm going to Dubai in 10 days, or just after the marathon, going to Dubai. And then I've got a massive tour next year, which is probably one of the biggest I've done, And the hard bit is that I take my family for a lot of them, but sometimes I just got to work, It's just literally work the whole time. So it gets... I'll have to leave the family at home. So for that tour, more than likely, I imagine they'll probably be at home, because it's just I'm going to be 2 days in one location, 2 days in the next location, 2 days in the next location, like that.
Just getting
like
it down.
3 weeks, yeah.
Well, you've provided a lot of value today. Appreciate it. Last question on the topic of giving value. What do you think your top 3 things to a young entrepreneur who wants to emulate the success you've had would be?
Top 3 things for a young entrepreneur to do to become successful is 100%. It has to be get responsibility, right? Whatever that looks like. Could be financial responsibility. Normally in this day and age, financial responsibility is the one. So start paying rent, start paying bills, and really stick to it. Don't just do it like 1 month, 2 months, and don't think of the mentality of like, oh, okay, this month I spent too much money myself, so mom or whoever, is it all right if I don't pay it this month? No. Full on responsibility. Try and get as much responsibility as possible at a young age. 2, I would say get a handle on your finances for sure. I think that's something I'm still quite bad at, but like really start tracking your income and expenses and just track that. That's it. As long as you track that, at least you know what's coming in and what's going out and where it's going, right? And then 3, consistency in anything you do. So whatever that passion is that you have, I know it's very cliche in terms of passion-wise, but it's true, because then when you do something you're passionate about, it doesn't feel like work. And especially when it's hard, which it will be, whatever it is you're trying to do, especially if it's hard, again, it won't feel as hard because you enjoy it. Right? It's something you enjoy. That's why I like podcasting and trading. They're two things I enjoy. So no matter how hard things got or how long it took, it doesn't matter because I enjoy them. Even to this day, I enjoy them, you know? And that's where the passion comes in, because if you're passionate about it, it doesn't matter if you're doing the same thing essentially for 4 years, you still enjoy it. But be consistent with it, you know, and don't give no perfect time, you know? Be consistent and don't think about perfection. Just start. And perfection will build itself up over time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate going on.
My pleasure, man.